This video is proudly brought to you by King Constructions. Welcome to Road to the Big Time. I show all about athletes' pathways to becoming a professional. Today we're chatting to Sean Baker. He owns a gym called PEAQ Conditioning. He's the head of S&C at the Australian lacrosse team. He's also an assistant at the Adelaide 36ers. Sean, can you tell us a little bit about your pathways into starting PEAQ and also your other sort of coaching roles?
Absolutely, boys. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm pumped up to be on the big time. It's been a pretty crazy journey. Real fortunate to have had a pretty diverse experience all the way through. I originally thought I was going to be a PE teacher, when I was your boys' age. Probably a message for you guys is, just enjoy the wherever the path takes you, because you sort of never know where you'll end up. I went to uni and started doing exercise science, and an opportunity popped up to get involved in an internship at the Adelaide Crows in 2011 and 2012. And that really sort of sparked me. I was always a bloke who enjoyed playing, coming through the ranks, but was probably more of a pre-season specialist, to be honest with you. I always really enjoyed the running and the lifting side of things, but couldn't get my hands on the pill on the weekend. So I thought, maybe the strength and conditioning, coaching side of things might be a bit more up my alley.
Yeah.
After internship, flowed into doing a bit of work at Woodverse Torrens Footy Club in the Sample. Ran the West Adelaide program for their senior team when we won the flag in 2015, which was pretty exciting. That led to opportunities to head over to India with the Darren Cricket Academy. So, get to experience some diverse cultures and then go work with the Power Development Squad, so the Father-Son Academy, which were next generation academies, which we're starting to see, a lot of those athletes coming through now. So the Marty Fredericks of the world, the Meadies, the Burgoynes, those sorts of guys, Lockie Jones, all when they were young tackers coming through. Even Tex Wanganeen, who made his debut a couple of weekends ago for the Bombers, that was pretty exciting. And then, probably got to the end of 2018. And all these roles that I've just talked about, although they've been fantastic and I really enjoyed them, they were all part-time roles. So, really didn't pay the bills, to be honest with you. But it was just a passion that I was following. Yeah. You find that, there are limited opportunities probably in the industry as a whole, but certainly in South Australia, you've got, for example, you've got the Crows, the Power, the Thunderbirds, the Sixers and Adelaide United. And you're potentially, having 100, 150 graduates each year. And, there's obviously a number of other exercise science students and health professionals, S&C professionals interstate too. So it's a really cutthroat industry, always on the side to make ends meet outside of those part-time roles we talked about. I would do private coaching. So our goal was to try to close the gap between local and elite, take all those principles that we're utilising with those AFL players, sample players, and make them available to the public. And that's something that just continue to grow. And my wife and I sort of said to ourselves, well, look, maybe do we have to move overseas to get a full-time opportunity for myself, or do we take the private side of things a bit more seriously? So thankfully, knowing what we know now, this is the end of 2018, we didn't realise that the world was going to close down and, we were going to go through all that chaos. But we decided to open up a facility in early 2019 and, the rest is history, mate. It's been a pretty exciting journey.
Yeah. Can you talk us through the first day with your internship at the Crows? What was going through young Sean Baker's mind?
Well, admittedly, I'd like to sort of consider myself a reasonably personal, sort of bubbly guy, and probably one of the ways that I do like to. Obviously, it's a pretty overwhelming environment. It's pretty exciting, and to an extent, you're now sort of standing alongside and working with guys you've been watching on TV for years, for example. So. To an extent, it is a little bit overwhelming, but probably one of my, coping mechanisms at the time was being super overly friendly and particularly with those people who maybe I didn't know their names or I did know their names, but I didn't want to sort of come off as a bit of a fanboy. So, I was like, hey, legend, how are you, mate? Or big fella, what's going on? And very, very quickly, admittedly, although that was sort of a bit of a coping mechanism, I did honestly get a bit of a clip from my supervisor pretty early on in the piece, which I'm very grateful for now. So he sort of brought me in maybe after a couple of days and said, mate, these guys aren't your mates. This is a really professional environment. You need to address them by their first name. You know, Dean Bailey and Brenton Sanderson, they're not your mates. Like, you need to sort of, so I did cop a bit of a whack really early, but in saying that, you know, that's set up the foundation of being a lot more professional in my career, you know, as years have gone on, and understanding when is the right time to be that, you know, bubbly Sean Baker, and when's the other time to put that switch and go into sort of serious mode. So, yeah, there was plenty flowing through my head on that first day. Don't worry about
that. What are some of the daily habits and that every athlete should have that you like take on and do?
Yeah, I think just really establishing a routine is really important. I think routine helps up to sort of to build consistency. Yep. And I think really at the end of the day, in anything we do, whether that is a high performance athlete, whether that is you know, a weekend warrior, you know, that could be, you know, the great Aaron King, you know, getting ready for cricket on the weekend, or it could be, you know, it could be, you know, your everyday punter. If you are able to develop a bit of a routine and some consistency,
yep.
You know, it's probably the best way to describe it, for example, is that, you know, I could write somebody the most science-based and evidence-backed program, but if somebody isn't able to complete that consistently, you're going to get pretty sort of average results from it. If you sort of, you know, chop in and out of it. If I wrote you know, a non-perfect program, a program that was okay, but, you know, had a few things that it could sharpen up, it was a very general program. If you did that consistently, you'd actually probably get better results than that, you know, perfectly science-based program that is done inconsistently. So I think, although it's a very boring answer, you know, whether it's training, whether it's nutrition, whether it's sleep, whether it's recovery, whether it's, you know, reading, whatever, consistency just is the key. So finding something that really sort of works into your schedule, and something that you can do, you know, consistently around all the other commitments you have in your life, for sure.
Is there any habits that you have that, like, daily, on a daily basis?
Yeah, great question. I think probably one of the biggest ones for me is setting my alarm a little bit early. Look, I know there are some people that are very religious about, you know, you must set your alarm at 4 a.m. in the morning to be, you know, to be a successful person. You know, I don't necessarily think that is suitable for everybody. I find that works for me, to be honest with you. So I guess in my situation, my day is split up a little bit, and it can depend on the day. So on average, you know, for example, our first classes at PEAQ start at 5:15 in the morning. There's a chunk of work that usually happens before people go to work and school, and then the middle part of our day is reasonably dead, and then it kicks back up off in the evening. Yeah. And sort of the other factor that I have from a family perspective as well is I've got a little 2-year-old child. So, you know, that does take a bit of energy and time too, which is fantastic. So I find that probably my most productive hour of the day is probably 4 a.m. to 5 a.m.
Yep.
So I usually will set the alarm for, you know, either 10 to 4 or 4 o'clock. I'll whack down a coffee, and then I sit on the couch, and it's my opportunity to catch up on programming, catch up on emails, catch up on, you know, members' feedback, or, you know, potentially any leads that we've got, referrals, and, you know, collaboration with physios, just because there's nobody there interacting with you. So you can just sort of really tuck into it. You don't have a, you know, a little 2-year-old child going, Dad, I want to watch Bluey or something, you know. So that you know, that's really helpful. And then, you know, similarly, if I was to go sit at the desk and greet people coming through, it's one of the things I love about the facility is that, you know, with that community feeling, but you also get nothing done. You know, you Johnny, how are you, mate? How's the physio going? How's the work going? And then go have a great session. Jane, how are you, mate? Great to see you. And every 15 seconds, somebody else is coming in, and you realise you get like an hour and a half in, you've done no work. So that's probably one of the big things that I always tick off.
Yeah.
And then always try to, and look, this is only something I've picked up recently. Probably, you know, in the last 6 months, I'd say I always try to read for sort of 20 minutes before I go to bed as well. That's been a bit of just a conscious effort just to continue to learn and develop myself too, but certainly something that is a newer habit for me as well, whereas probably, you know, that those early starts have been something I've done for quite a while.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think reading's helped you so far in your progress?
Yeah, look, I think just from a knowledge perspective, you know, you've always got to take reading with a pinch of salt. You know, it's really important to make sure you're reading the theory behind training protocols and principles, and, you know, biomechanics and, you know, joint angles and all those sorts of things. But also making sure that, is that applicable to your environment, to the community that you're working with. You always have to, use your coach's intuition to evaluate that.
Yeah.
Because you can't just flick it into your program for the sake of, I read this in a book, so it must work. Because a lot of these the times that you read this stuff, it's been done in a full-time professional environment or done potentially in a scientific lab where all of the variables are really controlled. Whereas if you are, rolling these sorts of things out with a sample footballer, often in the books that you've read, it doesn't always, correlate that the person that they've worked with in the book hasn't been on a job site from 6 a.m. A lot of sample footy players are tradies, electricians, and they've been bloody loading up timber for 8 hours a day, and they get to training and are supposed to perform. And conversely, you might have students who have been sitting down for 8 hours and just are mentally drained because they've had to sit through 6 lectures and had a test as well. So you've got everything in between. So it's always about critically analysing. So from that point of view, I'm big on sort of mindset as well. So reading a few books like High Performance Habits. There's a book called Mindset. All those sorts of things where just changing the way that you respond to things, I think, has been another aspect of reading that's been really beneficial. So all situations can have different. So the same situation, could have this, could happen to all three of us. Yeah. But the way that we react and the way that we sort of absorb that information is something that can be highly independent. And same thing that we could all have a car crash today, and one of us can think, bloody hell, this is shit. This is no good. Or and some person might go, well, you know what, that's not great, but thank God it didn't die. So then there's lots of different ways you can take the same instance happening to you and think about it in a more positive light. So that's been something that I've been reading about as well, which I think has been awesome.
Yeah, sick. I think I'm sort of interested in what your role looks like. Take the Australian lacrosse team for an example. Like, what does your role as an S&C coach look like?
Yeah, that's it's actually quite a different role to most other roles that I've had in the past, simply because it is more remote. So to give you a bit of a landscape, the reason I ended up getting involved in this role was that we opened the doors of PEAQ. And I originally thought that, for example, it would primarily be, footballers, amateur footballers coming through, and we give them an opportunity to train like their favourite AFL athletes. But what we found as well, just as much as your weekend warriors, is that athletes at the top of their game in more lowly funded sports were really drawn to the facility. So, we're getting athletes that represent Australia for lacrosse, for example, coming down and training who might have been previously going to an F45. Simply because they've never had, the opportunity to train like that, before, because of the lack of funding in their sport. Same with, we've had ultimate frisbee, we've had rugby league, which, sounds like a more mainstream sport, but in South Australia is very lowly funded. Roller derby and everything in between, which has been awesome. So what that looks like is that there's probably the big blocks of our athletes. We've got some in WA, some in SA, some in Victoria. And then we've got a few sort of over in Europe and the US as well, because a lot of our really good athletes head over and play, college over there and potentially get scholarships from that point of view. So a lot of my role is actually remote. So how that looks is, I figure out when we are coming together as a squad to either train for a training camp or for a competition, and essentially work backwards to figure out what our training loads for each week should be for different positions. So, our attackers and defenders will cover different distances to what our midfielders would do, and also differently to what our goalies would. So each week I've got a target that they need to hit from a kilometres and from a speed point of view. They track all of their sessions with GPS units, and essentially I'm sort of periodising that. We also subgroup our strength and power programming. So I've put together, your best case scenario strength power group. We've got an injury prevention group for those who potentially have had a history of injuries or maybe are getting towards the back end of their career. We've got a hypertrophy group. So for any of our athletes that need to put on a bit more, body armor, a bit more muscle, so they're lifting a few more times per week. And then also a development group for some of those guys who potentially haven't had a great deal of experience. So we sort of put them into subgroups based on what their coaches think or what they think specifically. And then also I'll individualize those as I get contacted. So potentially I'll have, Steve O reach out from WA and say, Bakes, my gym doesn't have this. Can you change this in my team builder program? So we sort of give them an alternative, or Bakes, I'm struggling with this, or, I'm sore, or I don't feel confident doing this lift. So they'll receive individualizations from that point of view. We had national selections only about a month ago now, and we are prepping up to head over to the World Games in Alabama in July, which is pretty exciting. And that is essentially a warm-up for the 2028 Olympics. So during our time of involvement with Australian lacrosse, the International Olympic Committee has got together and decided that we should be involved in the Olympics. So, these guys are going to be Olympians one day as well, which is pretty exciting too. So lots of remote work, lots of Zoom calls, lots of digital programming, lots of checking in via Facebook and those sorts of things too. So yeah, pretty diverse role, but it's been exciting to be involved in.
Yeah. What would your favourite moment be in your sporting career?
As an S&C coach, that's a great one. There's been a couple. Probably, it's hard to go past any of the championships we've been involved with. So we're involved in a couple of under-18 Centre of Excellence premierships at Woodville, to then go on, and also some reserves premierships there as well, to go on then win a league premiership with the West Adelaide Footy Club was probably, one of the defining points of my career to this point in time, which is amazing. So, we've sort of had success at every level of SANFL to this point in time. Yeah. From there, the opportunity to go over and experience India, that was an awesome cultural experience. And then everything through that, we more recently have been involved in programming for the newly formed National Hockey Super League for ice hockey in Australia. The Adelaide Extreme were fortunate enough to win the inaugural season, and we did all the S&C programming too. So, to see those guys, anytime you win a championship, really, and you it's not about us as coaches, it's about seeing the joy in the faces of those athletes and, them achieving their dreams and just playing a small piece in the puzzle that is high performance. They could be the fittest athletes in the world, but if you didn't have, the coaching to go with that, or if you didn't have the skill to go with that, you won't achieve success. Conversely, if you had a lot of skill and a great coaching panel, but your S&C programming is poor, you potentially don't achieve that sort of success too. So you always remember there's lots more losers than there are winners in every competition. There's only ever one winner, every single year. So to be involved in any of those is pretty special.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, just wanted to touch on what you were saying before. Obviously, the different components into like creating high performance. How much do you think the mind sort of weighs into that compared to obviously your body?
Yeah, and look, I am an S&C coach, so usually people would expect that I say the physicality is the most important thing. I think actually mindset is probably, look, it's so untapped. I'm just putting a number on it, but it could be 80%. You could have the perfect coaching structure around you. You could be the fittest person and the strongest person in the league. You could be the most skillful. But if something is happening to you psychologically, all of that falls apart, Whereas conversely, there's been so many instances where you've seen somebody with a great amount of talent who just doesn't have the mindset, whether that is they crack under pressure or they just don't have the ability to put in the work because, they don't have that sort of high-performing mindset, that they waste that talent. Whereas conversely, I'm sure you guys know and have seen plenty of instances of guys that aren't really that talented. They grind, they work hard, they're composed under pressure, and they go, much further than maybe some of those talented guys. So, there's really so much that we just don't know about it yet, and I think that'll be the next boom. Essentially, what we've seen is that the biggest, investment in sports and training performance probably initially has all been physical. And then, probably over the last decade now, you'd say that has moved to technological. So, you see force plates, you see GPS, you see accelerometers and all these bits and pieces. Like that's been the big investment. I think now we're truly sort of understanding how much that mindset sort of impacts. And I think that'll be the biggest and latest development and where sort of sports goes soon. So I'm really excited to see how much of that brain potential that we can unlock.
Yeah, fair enough. Have you got a top three list of the top sort of athletes that have moved through one of your programs?
No, actually, I probably haven't thought about that too much, to be honest with you. Yeah, there's I guess there's a number of ways you could really evaluate that, to be honest with you. And we've been fortunate to have lots of sort of different opportunities. So let's say, probably one that springs to mind and everybody talks about is that, we are fortunate to have a pretty strong relationship with Aaron Phillips. That was developed by me working with the Crows AFLW for a couple of years there, which was pretty exciting. Then obviously we went through stages there where gyms were locked down and, potentially there were instances where we weren't allowed at the club because of crossover with the men's program and all those sorts of things. So to have her come out and work at PEAQ for a duration of time, was pretty exciting. And, she's like the greatest of all time, so multi-sport athlete and Olympian. She's probably really hard to go past and probably is an example of that mindset that we talk about. Her body potentially at times has let her down with multiple ACLs and that sort of stuff. But when you get to see the inner workings of her mind, she's a freak, and it's awesome to see. Just super, super competitive. Will never let anybody or anything beat her. More recently, even as recently as this week, I'm probably thinking of this guy because he springs to mind. But we've got Matt Leo in town at the moment. I don't know if you boys have been following, but Matt is an NFL athlete. He's a defensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's originally an Adelaide boy, played a bit of footy, massive, massive unit. He went over to some sort of physical tryouts in Sydney probably about 10 years ago now and was sort of touted as talent. He went over and did college and was fortunate enough to get drafted and has been on Philadelphia's list for the last 4 years. He's back in town at the moment and has been doing his off-season with us at PEAQ, which has been pretty exciting, and just a ridiculous athletic beast. Just massive, powerful, fast, super, super humble guy as well. He just draws attention whenever he walks in a facility. People get their phones down. He's just, and to be probably playing in the biggest league on earth, I think that's another one that's been pretty exciting. And then, it's hard to round out. So, there's so many other people that I think could slot into this position. A number of the 36ers guys that we've got on the list at the moment, there's some awesome, and incredible feats. Probably I'll highlight, probably because of his notoriety, and I'm not too sure if you guys know much about him, but Kai Sotto, 7'2", and for a guy that's that height, just the ability for him to run without falling over his own legs, I think is pretty impressive. I think I heard a quote from a coach once. If there's anybody that's 7 foot that can run without tripping over, you may as well just draft them straight away. Because they're a rarity to come across. There's so much distance between their brain and their limbs. There's a lot of coordination to happen. We have to modify a lot of the exercises from an S&C programming point of view because he can't fit on any of the chin-up bars or any of the machines. He's so tall. I've never seen a man, walk into a facility and, have to duck for the most part, or he can't do overhead press because, he will hit the roof. So, pretty cool athlete to work with as well. And obviously he is sort of, the hope of all of his country as well. So in the Philippines, he's got millions of followers. So look, there's a million other athletes that could have added into that list, but they're probably the three that spring to mind off the top of my head.
Yeah. What does it feel like to be in a group of three people at GC to win a barrel?
Well, pretty special. I think maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was the yellow boots. I'm not too sure I deserve the barrel, but that is obviously one of my fondest memories. And probably 2020 was the best year of my own sporting, my very, very low sporting prowess. I'm very realistic that my time is best suited, coaching and not being an athlete myself. But winning the flag and then achieving that feat on the day was pretty special. But certainly, they must have. I'm just lucky that Charlie Mon got knocked out. I guess it really. I actually paid the opposition. I said, mate, come on, give me one game with the best on ground. That'd be nice. So, very, very grateful and very grateful for Kingy for organising that, mate. It still sits very proudly on top of the fridge in the kitchen. So, I let everybody know whenever they walk through the house. But what it's all about.
Yeah. Another one. What do they call you, buckets?
This is very embarrassing. And who, I don't even know. This is a blast from the past. I'm not too sure who managed to squeeze it. Was it Charlie that let you in on this or what?
No.
Surely.
No.
They called me, this started many, many moons ago. It was when I first started doing strength training. Again, I'll deviate a little bit here just to give you some perspective. I was a bit of a shit at school, to be honest with you. I didn't do very well up until year 11. I was always the skinniest, scrawniest kid on the footy team. So I was playing out at Port Magpies at the time and used to get pushed off the footy a fair bit. But, I just used to run. I used to love running. I was a whopping 65 kilos. And in year 11, I think it was, that I got my first ever good school report. And as a reward, mum and dad bought me a set of 2.5 kilo dumbbells. So just to really bulk up, I thought, I had no idea what I was doing. So in my room every night, I'd do 50 bicep curls, I'd do 50 lateral raises, I'd do 50 overhead press and 50 punches with these 2.5 kilo dumbbells. I look at it now and think, oh my God. But, you've got to start somewhere. And when I first started weight training, I used to walk around like I was holding So that was potentially where that very embarrassing nickname came from, is looking like I was holding 2 buckets of water.
So what does the future look like for you, from not just from an S&C perspective, but for PEAQ as well?
Yeah, so we're really excited. We've been pretty intent and pretty vocal about our desire to, evolve and expand from a PEAQ perspective. So, I'm a man who is a passionate S&C coach who is making up, the business side of things as he goes along. I've been, fortunate just to try to learn off as many people as possible. But learning, probably how, the challenges of expansion, just in terms of, council approvals and architect drawings and so on and so forth. But we are very, 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 very close to putting pen to paper for a bigger facility. That will still be sort of in the very close vicinity of where we are in Port Adelaide at the moment, simply because we don't want to displace our community. We have talked about doing multiple locations. Maybe we should get a Gawler one going, boys. But unfortunately, it is really hard to maintain quality control. Hard enough to find good people for one for one location, and I always want to have a space where I can walk in the door and know all of our community's names and say good day and sort of see what's going on. So we will just go to one bigger space. At the moment, our current PEAQ facility is 400 square meters. What we are potentially signing for in the coming days is 1,500 square meters. So a big step up. That will include a full-size basketball court. We're looking at indoor, like a little indoor soccer, hockey, lacrosse pitch as well, bigger gym space, more consulting rooms, and make it, we're really trying to close the gap between not only local and elite, but close the gap between, America and Australia. I'm sure you guys have seen the American private facility models. There's thousands of private facilities over in the States where NFL players come and train. We've been fortunate that we've built that credibility, and we get AFL players, and we get A-League players, we get NBL players. We've got an NFL player coming and doing an off-season with us. But we want to really, step it up and make it, so that we do have a Century Out model over here. But there has been a process. We almost had another place locked in, ready to go, but unfortunately got knocked back by the council for not enough parking spaces. So it is a process that we're learning as we go. But we're hopefully, once that goes, it is going to be a brand new build. So potentially 12 months away, but hopefully something like, Australia hasn't seen before. For myself personally, I would love to still keep my finger in the pie from a pro sport point of view. So, just keep exploring those options. I want to make sure it's an opportunity that I can still juggle the private side of things with PEAQ. I never, if I'm completely honest, an AFL system, for example, that is all consuming. You are there from 6 till 6 every day. I don't think that's viable to be able to juggle with, a private facility, but potentially, if there's opportunities to step up in the NBL or WNBL, whether it's A-League, whatever sort of something, if there is anything that pops up in that space, we'd love to explore it as well. But we'll just sort of, continue to watch that space and see what happens. And, hopefully we can achieve a medal placing with our lacrosse squads in July as well. So lots of exciting things happening, just, a bit of time to tick it all over. But, and then hopefully, getting the Kings back in the facility as well to come and defy the laws of gravity would be awesome.
All right, got anything to add?
No, mate, it was great. Thank you.
My pleasure, boys. Thanks for reaching out and having me on this show. And if anybody wants to ask any questions or reach out, feel free to touch base on. I answer pretty much all of our socials at PEAQ Performance on Instagram, PEAQ Performance, or just PEAQ on Facebook as well. Feel free to reach out and always here to help out for sure.
Yep, 100%.
Sweet, that's been Ride to the Big Time.